So today's video is just to go over the equipment we need to interface an arcade board with, getting an arcade board running if you don't have a cab. And we use what we call here a Supergun. And we're gonna go over that in detail in a minute. But in addition to the Supergun, what else do we need? We need a power supply that runs the Supergun and runs the power needed on the board. And that might vary depending on the kind of board we've got. We then need to interface between the Supergun and the board. Now this is what they call a Jamma adapter, and the Jamma adapter is good for newer games, but sometimes we don't have that, and so therefore we need to use this interface here that goes between the Jamma and then the old version of the game. In addition to that, we need a way to control the game, and so we've got an interface here between a DB15, which is used on the Neo Geo controller, and this is a PlayStation type connector. You can get different kinds, but my arcade stick's a PlayStation connector. And then you also need an upscaler if you want to show it on VGA. You can use a CRT with one of these, which can come straight out of this video point here we'll get into, or you can use an upscaler, and in this case we're using the Framemeister. There are others around. The OSSC is another open source version, and a little bit cheaper, and become a little bit more popular over recent years due to customization of it. So let's have a quick look now at the Supergun itself. So the Supergun itself, as we said, is a way to supply the arcade board with the power that we need and interface with the screen and the controls and the sound. So on this particular board, this one is an open source project that is effectively you buy the PCB and then you can buy parts that go on it and you make the kit yourself. And it's a way of getting a bit of a cheaper Supergun than some of the other types. Obviously these range in price up into the hundreds of dollars. This one itself I think was around $60 with the kit to produce yourself. So what do we have here? So we've got the Jamma connector, so that goes onto the board, and that's the specific kind of connector there. It's a standard Japanese connector. It's carrying power, 12 volts, 5 volts, minus 5 volts, sound, RGB, and then controls and extended controls as well. In addition to that, we've got the power comes in through this Molex here. We've got two buttons. We've got a test button and a service button here. That allows you to obviously access some features of certain boards. We've got a voltage regulator here, and it's showing you when it's plugged in, it shows you what the actual voltage is on your board. So that's really good and useful. We obviously want that typically around 5 volts for our boards. Here we got some pots for RGB, so we can change the colors based on that. Once you've tweaked it, it should be pretty much good to go. And then on this side we've got the output here, which is a DIN socket, a mini DIN, and then sound. So this is a little bit proprietary, I think, but you just need to make a plug up that then converts to either RGB VGA DB9 socket, or you can go into a SCART lead. And then the sound there can either be mono or stereo based on this jumper here. So how I interface with the screen with this one, that plugs into the DIN socket we just saw there. Then that is a SCART lead there, and that plugs into my SCART connector that's either in my this here is my SCART connector that then goes into a DB9, which connects to my BNC connector on my CRT. So in terms of power supply, we have our switching arcade power supply, They're pretty much all the same. They're relatively cheap. This one is from retroarcade.us. The main things to note: are what we've got here. So we've got input AC, neutral and live, and then we've got a ground, and then we've got our 12 volts and -5 volts, +5 volts, and ground. And then we can actually change the voltage here. So if we're slightly out on our voltage we see on our Supergun, then we can change that to tweak it back to 5 volts. One thing I did notice is if you don't connect the grounds up between the this ground coming in here and this ground here, then you're getting funny sparklies on the screen, ripple effect, which may be obvious to electronic engineers out there, but doesn't necessarily say that in the instructions to do that. So the output of that is a Molex type connector, which looks like that, and that plugs into the Supergun. So the next part is the Framemeister. This is a little unit where it takes an input there, which is RGB. Again, that's a proprietary connector, and I can show you what we connect into that pretty soon. Power buttons, menu items, a lot of different inputs here. So S-video, and then we've got digital inputs on the back there. What I tend to do is it goes through RGB in there, and then out in terms of HDMI there. So that's what we get out of that one. And then there's a multitude of options in this little device. I add scan lines onto mine just to make it look a bit more authentic. So the next thing to look at is two different kinds of board. So we've got an older board here. This one's called Champion Baseball. We saw it in the last video. And this one here is called Dotori Kun. We're actually going to do a series on this board coming up. But this one is Jamma. You can see it's got a wider plug interface there. And this one is a bit smaller. And these ones all vary depending on who made them. They all have the same inputs, outputs, etc. But the placement of them varies. And so, since we have our Supergun, that's always got a certain input, this one connects just nicely. You can see there, just make those two together, make sure the pins line up, Bob's your uncle. So now that can interface fully with the power, screen, sound controls, and you're good to go. And that would be true of any modern board as well. It's got this Jamma connector. But if we don't have that situation, then, and we have an older board, we need to make up or buy a connector that goes between the Jamma connector, which was the same as that one, but now this one connects to the board over here, and all you got to do is either buy or make up, as I say, connections between that to that, and you can find those kind of things online as to the pin outs of the various two. This board's quite nice because you can just buy it. You can buy the connector, you can buy this board, and then all you have to do is solder this on and then solder jumpers between there. So a bit of a faff to do it, takes you an hour or so, but it's a bit cheaper, or you can just buy one, depending on what you want to do. In this instance, the particular joystick that I'm using just has this, these connectors. We've got a USB connector on this one. It's a May tag or something or other. I'll correct that later. Then, as we saw, we've got this PlayStation connector there, just connects into that adapter that we saw. Now, what we've got here is a genuine Pac-Man board. Certainly been a dream of mine to have a Pac-Man board over the years. This is a Midway Pac-Man board, so it's a US version. We've got the, instead of the custom chips, we have two custom chips on the Pac-Man board, that one and that one, but instead of the custom chips, we've got the custom boards. Basically there was some discrete logic that was doing the work in those custom chips, and so you could get replacement boards for those that just plugged in. I'm particularly interested in getting this board like this because I actually want to do some deep dives into how Pac-Man works, and therefore I want to have the ones with the boards to match up with the schematics that we've got. Okay, so on this one, as we said before, there's a proprietary connector, and so it's a bit different to, it's certainly not Jamma, but that's where it gets all of its stuff. We've got our EEPROMs here for the game, and that 6H there one is it's a bit different to the others because this came up with a speed up version of Pac-Man, and so I took that out and replaced it with an older version. So this here is the adapter for Pac-Man. We've got a sync pot on there as well, and a couple of dip switches to change some things. Let's stick this on first. And let's stick this on. Alright, now we're ready to go. Right, this goes over here. Plug this in. For sound, I'm just using a sound stick like that, sound bar, and then sound will come out of here and go into there. And just stick that down there. Goes in there. Then we need this, plugs in there. Plugs in there. We can see we've got 508 volts. Just turn that down a little bit. There we go, down to 5, so no problem there. Shifting up a little bit. There you go. And so there we go. Now we can play some Pac-Man.
Okay, so here we go. So with Pac-Man fired up, the first point to note is that the music sounds a little saturated. It's okay, but this may mean the amplifier chip needs replacing, or generally that there is a slight issue with the sound circuitry. Now, since this is the Mr. Retro Wolf channel, we'll be comparing this original hardware to the Mr. Core side by side. You can't see it right now, but the colours are a little washed out on the actual board. This may be the colouring of the Supergun, either due to me not dialing in the colour pots correctly, or that there's a difference between the cheaper Superguns and the higher end models. I'm not quite sure on that one. Now you'll see I'm playing very badly in the video clip. The main reason for this is that the arcade stick I showed you earlier is an 8-way stick, and that's a very bad idea for playing Pac-Man. That really needs to be a 4-way stick only, so you'll see I'm all over the place. I do want to get together a 4-way stick that goes into this Supergun, but I haven't managed to do that just yet. Ideally I'd get a leaf switch version so that it would be very authentic to the original Pac-Man cabinet. One other thing, I haven't done an analysis of the ROM set that's being used on this Pac-Man PCB, but I do notice that the typical patterns I'd be using aren't working as I'd like, so there must be a slight difference there. Again, I'd have to try it with a proper stick to be 100% sure. It really is a classic and fun game. My highest score stands at around 144,000 only, so I've plenty of room for improvement. Now onto the Mr. Core version. You can hear very clear audio and the colours are very vibrant. Other than that, the versions are identical. and I do notice in post-processing that I have the scan lines around the wrong way on the Mr. core. The original board has the scan lines vertical as they should be. That's still artificial as it's only being done by the Framemeister. But on the Mr. we can flip them. You can see my strategy here is working pretty well with getting all the ghosts and sometimes getting up to the 1600 bonus score. And I'm getting close to almost getting the full score on that first level. So that's it for this video, just a basic introduction to getting arcade boards playable with minimal peripherals. Stay safe and we'll catch you next time.